Welcome all to the webinar on visualization of information on climate and climate change. My name is Jeanette Bessenbinder and I work for the Climateurope project. As you've seen in the announcement of this webinar, climate change and impacts are often difficult to communicate. It seems far away and a single person cannot do much about it. Besides, alternative alarmistic messages tend to paralyze instead of resulting in actions. So how could we improve a safe landing of the climate change message for policymakers and decision makers so they can base their decisions on the right information? Making use of visualization can be highly effective, but if not used well, it can also be counterproductive. In this webinar, 2 experts will show their experiences. Afterwards, there's time for discussions and to give your own experience. My colleague Rob Groenland will screen the chat for your remarks and questions, also if you give them during the talks. The first speaker is Bernadet Overbeek. She works for the Dutch Meteorological Institute, KNMI, and she's advisor for weather and climate. She works a lot on communication and user engagement. Visualization is an important tool in her work. That's also something issue. Bernadet, I will give the presenter rights to you. Moment. For you. Moment. There are so many people joining that it's difficult to find you again. Bernadet, you now have the speaker rights.
Yes, okay.
You can start presenting. I will put off my camera and please start your presentation.
Yeah. It's 1 moment, please. Yes. So do you see the first screen of my presentation? It's great to see that so many. Oh, I have an echo.
Bernadet, I unmuted you. If you do not manage to present, I can also show your presentation.
Oh, well, the problem is not that that I don't manage to share the screen, but I heard an echo.
Yes, I put off the, I muted all participants, so I hope it's better now.
I can try again.
Please.
Yes, is it okay? Do you see my first slide now?
No, not yet. I will show the presentation from my screen. Oh, no, yeah. It's starting.
It's now coming in. Yeah.
Okay. I hope I don't hear an echo anymore of myself. No, this is great.
I will mute all the other participants.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's great to see that so many people are interested in the subject of visualizing climate information. And I'm happy to share with you some examples from the Netherlands. So I'm working at KNMI on the communication of the Dutch national climate scenarios. And our goal with these climate scenarios and the related visuals is to make people aware of what a future climate in the Netherlands might look like, including the uncertainties therein. We want to provide climate information in that way that users can make elaborate decisions. And especially for adaptation, it's important to get information on the local scale. So for our climate communication, we need to zoom in here on the Netherlands. So what do we do, being a scientific institute? Our basic instinct is to explain the facts. Because that's where we are there for, aren't we? To explain facts. The problem actually is not that people haven't been given enough facts, it's that they haven't been given facts in the right ways. And I caught myself some weeks ago on a party just before Corona time, trying to convince the owner of a transport company that climate change is real and that the fact that CO2 is helping plants grow doesn't mean that the growth of CO2 in the atmosphere is nothing to worry about. So I emptied my wheelbarrow with knowledge on top of him, and he was not going to be convinced. So what did I do wrong? I didn't make a real connection. In the contrary, I was attacking his social values, which were driving is fun, driving is my livelihood. So by attacking these social values, people often become defensive and will deny the facts. So what to do? We need to look for shared values and make a real connection to our public. So how do we do that? How do we make a real connection to our public? From literature, we derive the following main three do's. One, close the distance, as climate change is often seen as something far away in space and time. So showing local climate change impacts can be very effective. Two, provide an action perspective, because people can feel paralyzed because of all the bad news, with a result, no reaction or a negative one. And the third is also show adaptation measures. Don't focus too much only on mitigation. And this is in line with the second argument. It's more about being optimistic. Show that we can, show that we are prepared. And these three do's can be very effectively be supported by visualizations. So I would like to give you 6 examples of the Netherlands of climate change communication and how we visualize them. On this sheet, you can see to which communication rule presented on the sheet before they meet with. And at the end, I would really like to hear your feedback of these examples because, well, they're just examples and I'm sure they can be improved. I would like to start with this first visualization of our 4 generic climate scenarios. This is the information at the base of many climate adaptation research in the Netherlands. And I would like to tell you something about the colors we have chosen. They represent important aspects of the scenarios. So green is a scenario which represents low temperature rise and limited drying out. And it refers to green grass, of which we'll have more in this scenario. Yellow refers to a drier scenario, so also more yellow grass. Red, of course, is standing for heat, so it's the scenario with the highest temperatures, and it's also the driest scenario. And the purple scenario is a combination of red, of high temperatures, and also we added some blue, because this scenario has enough rain in summers. So with these intuitive colors, we hope to make it easier to remember and understand which story the scenarios are telling. In the beginning, I explained that our target group are users of climate information, mainly for climate adaptation. And this is a very broad group, varying from policymakers, researchers, water managers, consultants, financial experts, but also the neighbors redesigning their garden. So we really need to diverge the message into different products. And for those users who just want to have a quick overview, we made this 2-pager. The icons for the climate variables, well, they are talking for themselves. And also we added information about the impacts on different sectors in the text boxes at the right. And we try to make a connection to our public using the photo of a typical Dutch coastline, and the dike expresses a combination of preparedness and urgency. And an attractive picture also helps keeping the attention of the public, so they might keep on reading. We also displayed our scenarios on maps, and I would like to give an example. This is what the summer precipitation in the Netherlands looks like in the current climate. And this is what it's going to look like in future. It's a reduction of 13%. So it's getting much drier. Or it could be this picture. A slight increase of 1.5%. So it's a totally different picture. So the message is it's really important to show multiple scenarios. If not, information about uncertainty is gone. But these maps might not be that attractive yet to many people. People want to know what's happening in their town, in their backyard, preferably. So that's why I would also like to give this second example about the regional translations of these national scenarios we also made. And these are online, easy reading background documents showing the facts and figures about climate change in a certain region. And I would like to present a few slides from one of them. Well, the visualizations in these regional translations are very important. They make people feel connected. They recognize their own surroundings. Oh, it's my city, in this case Amsterdam, which we're talking about. Recognition of the own neighborhood helps to make people feel connected to a story. Here the urban island effect is explained and how big the effect can be. And this story is much more interesting projected on the own living area, pointing out, for example, difference between your working area and the neighborhoods where you live. And it has to be said, graphs are quickly going to be boring, even showing clear trends. And the climate change message is also very negative. It's not that nice to see slide after slide that climate is changing. My experience is that after a few slides with graphs, the first are going to yawn and then they're going to frown. So we try to add also positive images, which of course should be intuitive as well. And the boy with the yellow boots already tells that the graph is about precipitation and that the graph is not about a lack of precipitation. We also want to give an impression of the risks involved, because it's the risks that give urgency for action. And this map of Amsterdam region shows that half of the area of Amsterdam is below sea level, showing that the impact of rising sea levels can be very high in this area. And in the third example, which I want to give, we make use of the visualization of memorable weather, and we show how such an event can look like in future climates. So here, quite memorable weather is shown. One of our highways is partly submerged in the east of the country after heavy precipitation in August 2010. And this is weather people remember. And if not, we can help them remember, showing historical pictures like this. In combination with these pictures, we show how this event can look like in a future climate. In this case, we translated in a weather model the historic event to a 2 degrees warmer climate. And because people have experienced the impacts of the historic event, people can also form a better picture of impacts of a possible future event. Another way to connect to your public is to make use of the weather forecast. The website of KNMI is very well found. In case of extreme weather, we have about 1 million visitors a day. All those people don't come searching for climate information, they come for the weather. So we thought by bringing in climate information in the weather production, we can bring climate change closer to the public. In this graph, one can see the prediction for the coming 15 days, and the broader the gray ray, the more uncertain the prediction. So we added information about the current climate. The red and blue line are the normal maximum and minimum temperature for the time of the year. And then we added information about the future normal climate. And the outer boundaries are the daily records, the highest and lowest temperatures ever measured. So these dotted lines. And if the prediction is very extreme, we show how extreme. We show a red dot with a text box in which we give information about how often it occurs and how much warmer that extreme is going to be in future. Our goal with this weather and climate graph is that people can place the weather prediction in the context of climate. So you can see when the weather is normal and when it's going to be more extreme. So we also want to highlight that weather extremes will be more extreme in future. Only giving the amount of degrees of a maximum temperature in future won't be as effective as saying this heat, which you're going to experience in a few days, will be even a few degrees higher in future. Critics say that people still might think, well, 2 degrees higher, so what? So you actually would like to make a link to the impact of those 2 degrees higher as well. And that's what we try to do in the online magazines KNMI is providing. This is the cover of a magazine which we made about the IPCC ESROC report about oceans and the cryosphere of last November. The idea of these specials is that they are easy to read. They consist of short text, nice photos and infographics. And I chose this cover to show you because it gave quite some commotion on social media, which I would like to share. We carefully selected the photographs. For example, at the upper right, we chose a researcher taking a sample of the ice in Antarctica. It's a real person, not a stage figure, because authentic pictures are proven to score higher in credibility. The photo at the right bottom we chose to show a solution, the Maaslandskering, part of the Dutch famous Deltawerken. And this supports our tool for communication, connect to adaptation. Then the big picture at the left, made by Stefan Olsen of the Danish Meteorological Institute, which was made at Greenland last summer. We thought this would be a great big picture because it went viral last summer and it had proven itself to be very strong. It shows at a glance what the special is about: snow, ice, oceans, and the impacts on human beings. But the use of this picture gave a lot of negative reactions on Twitter. People said, this is normal melting during summer, which we see. This has nothing to do with climate change. True. Others even said, well, KNMI, you were providing fake news using this picture. But we did not say the picture was about climate change, and the article behind this is about the role of ocean, snow and ice in the climate, which the photo is perfectly presenting. So, what do you think? Is it misleading picture or is it a good picture? That might be interesting to us later on. My last example is about storytelling, which is becoming more and more popular. Because we know that stories are easier to remember and audiences find them more engaging. For a good story, you need a setting, plot, solution, and of course, a character. We asked a student science communication to find out if KNMI could use storytelling for communicating climate change. And she wrote stories for different types of audiences to connect to different groups with different cultural values and checked if the risk perception of people changed reading the story of their own target group and if it changed reading the story of another one. To make a connection to the target groups, the visuals of the persons were of great help. You can see that they are real persons, not stage figures, and that they are in their natural habitat. Just the picture alone already can seduce you reading a text or not, and can make you believe the text or not, just because you identify yourself with that kind of person. So what did I try to tell with this webinar? Well, my main message would be, we have to give the facts a safe landing. And therefore we need to make a connection to our public. And visuals are of great help in making this connection, because they make people recognize their own location or their own type of person, or they can help remember experienced extreme weather. Visuals get the first attention of our public and will be a strong tool underpinning our main message. But especially because they are powerful, we have to check very well if they match our main message and can't be misinterpreted. Then I would like to give 3 short tips for further reading. The user learning services of Copernicus have a wealth of free online courses to follow related to climate change. One of it is the course of Visualization and Communications of Uncertainties. So if you haven't had enough yet, you will definitely find a lot of interesting information here. And then if you're searching for climate change photographs, you should definitely check the image gallery of climate visuals, because they really have outstanding, not standard photos of real people. So please have a look there. And if you're already there, you could also check their 7 principles about using visuals for climate communication. And because I found them very helpful. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I will give the word to Jeanette to moderate the questions.
Thank you, Bernadet, for your interesting presentation. I'm not sure whether there are a lot of questions, but I would, if someone has a question for clarification, they could ask it now. And in the meantime, I'm trying to get trying to give the presenter rights to the next speaker. Can you look whether there are questions for clarification?
Yeah, there's one question from Beatrix Van about the slide with information of the summer precipitation in the future. That was in the beginning. 2050 represents just one exact year or an interval, just like the reference period. Is that so? Is that true?
Yeah. No, it's indeed the period around the 30-year period around 2050. So not one exact year.
Yes. Are there any more questions, Rob?
Yeah, the next question is about Bernadet. Do you conduct activities with stakeholders to co-design products, and how are those activities?
Maybe we should leave these questions for the discussion afterwards, because
Interesting question, anyway.
We will note it down and come back to it later on. Yes?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I now like to introduce the next speaker, which is Isadora Jimenez. She is communication specialist at the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, and she is involved in the development of several climate services, where visualization is also an important tool. Isadora, can I give the word to you? Can you try to share your screen now?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to start sharing. So, perfect. You're there. You should be seeing my screen. Is that right?
I do. Yes. Go ahead.
So,
thank you.
Yeah, I guess some of you are climate scientists, but I'm sure definitely that quite a few of you in this telco are not. So for those that you are not, can you imagine you're a climate scientist and you come to read this headline in the New York Times in November last year? This was an actual headline, and no need to say that there were plenty of discussions about this in the newspaper comments and also in Twitter. Climate scientists have been warning about climate change for decades back into the 80s. But somehow the message didn't seem to get to the right people or trigger action as scientists expected. The problem is that many scientists assume that by giving information, data, and facts in the most neutral as possible way, people could understand the implications and see the magnitude of the problem and react accordingly. But scientific information is the core of the message, but how we communicate this information is what really makes a change. And there are two main aspects of communication that we have to take into account. And they were quite aligned with what Bernadet was explaining before. First, narratives, storylines, storytelling. You can call it as you want. Explaining your points as a story is the most effective way to catch the attention and engage your audience. So Greta Thunberg is a clear example of a powerful narrative. Young 15-year-old girl concerned about climate change decides she can do something against it. And it's a small step, is doing a school strike every Friday. In 2 years since we started hearing about her, she has changed from being just a curiosity, a story to tell, to become a major environmental activist and what I call a climate influencer. So the personal and the human story behind was extremely powerful. But there is a second point, which is also visual communication, because visuals also make the difference in how a message can impact your memory. So a powerful image is an anchor in your memory. And another clear example for me are the climate stripes from Ed Hawkins. And we have seen 1,000 times a time series showing the global temperature increase. But the climate stripes, for me, I mean, it's kind of beautiful, simple, and clearly conveying the core message. It's a scientific message, but just put beautiful. And to the point that people is adopting this visual as a declaration. So I have seen knitted scarves with these climate strips, and lately, 2 days ago, I was seeing some masks for all the coronavirus pandemic that they show the printed stripes as a declaration that, okay, now we have a crisis, but we have another crisis coming, the climate crisis. So it becomes part of the explanation of a problem by people. So good visual communication and an engaging storyline is what can make a difference between engaging or not your audience regarding climate change. And it is not me saying this. I mean, it's not Bernadet saying this. It's really that people from marketing, they have been successfully doing this for decades. So it's a way of working that works. And it may seem we're talking about how to talk about climate change to broad audiences, and Bernadette's talk was about this, but this is also relevant to communicate to anyone whose activity is being affected by climate. Anyone, really. So this is relevant to talk with policymakers that need to understand IPCC reports. Communication is key here. And this is relevant to talk with private sector that needs to make a change to their climate resilient activity, that they need to adapt to climate change. And this is relevant to engage with civil protection, insurance, agriculture, and many other sectors. So narratives and visual communication are key to engage with your target audience. It's important to raise awareness of a problem, but more importantly is also to trigger action. And for that, we need to provide information that is actionable. So information that can actually help someone who is not an expert in climate information to make informed decisions. And this is where the field of climate services is working in. So it's trying to bridge this gap between climate scientists and all the massive amount of climate information that we have right now, and those who could benefit from having it. And no surprise, in climate services, there are a lot of climate scientists working it, but they are not the only ones. There are also many other profiles, including experts in science communication, to be able to communicate, to create these narratives. There are social scientists in order to provide this engagement facilitated in the proper way, educators, economists, to find a different discourse, not talking only from the side of climate, but talking on the side of economy, on education. And the core of the field is to provide actionable information. And most likely in an era where we live connected and we have smart devices everywhere in our houses, the most likely is that this climate service will have a visual component. So people, experts in data visualization, they are also very relevant. So what I want for this talk is I want to show you how visual communication played a key role in the development of 3 climate services led by BSC, the Barcelona Supercomputing Center where I work. And I have picked these three of them, because they were really different in their purpose and approach. And the first one, it was an example about climate service for renewable energies. So we were targeting different people in energy, but particularly energy traders. And traders are highly technical people with an extensive background on climatology, meteorology, and they are used to handle a lot of information from many sources and to make an analysis and make decisions based on it. So what we did is, in the framework of the S2S4E project, we implemented an operational climate service that provides forecast of the evolution for the climate for the coming weeks and months, of temperature, wind, precipitation, but also other energy relevant variables. And you have here the URL, so you can just go there, register, play a bit with it. It is open and for free for everyone. But I wanted to focus a bit on some of the visual challenges that we had to deal when creating this tool. So climate predictions are better communicated, or should be communicated, as probabilistic. So you don't forecast the temperature will be 25 degrees. Instead, you forecast how probable it is to have temperature above or below what it is normal for that particular period. And how do you communicate these probabilities was one of the challenges that we had to solve from data visualization. I mean, we had to solve it, but all climate services is trying to solve this. So now, if you let me be bold, I want to show live. I want to make this a bit, show you in place. So when you get to the tool, this is what you can see after you register. We were dealing on how to show these probabilities. So what we were doing was first just basic thing, just colors. So if we are seeing temperature, then if you see orange, then you have probabilities of temperature to be above the average. If you see blue, is below. This is the forecast for the week between the 11th and the 17th, so the week that we are now. And this is a first approach. But if you have 50% probabilities of being below the average, you still have 50% probabilities of not happening exactly the opposite. So we were investigating how to solve the problem. So we wanted to give power to the people using this platform to say from which threshold of probability they could feel comfortable to make a decision. So they could just say, no, I mean 50, no, but I would like to see 60%, or no, I'm much more, I really need an 80% probability. And what the tool is doing is they are given another level of information. So now you can see the color everywhere, but then you can see in which places the probability is 80%, your threshold, or above. You could even be more restrictive, say, no, I mean, just show me, I'm not gonna make a decision if it's not above 90% probability, but still you could find places and spots in the map. So you could find this place in Denmark and just say, okay, wow, I mean, there's 100% probability of being below the average temperature. So energy traders, they want to know this. We want to put different types of information. So first color, just the category, then being able about the threshold, but then energy traders, they want more information. So they wanted to see also the distribution. Okay, 100 probability, but how? Then we were also providing more information on the ensemble on the members of the model, so they could see where this 100% probability would come from. Besides this, they were also considering when we were talking with them, no, but we really need to know if this is an extreme or this coming something that is quite away from what we could expect. So for example, we were also showing how much was the probability of being below the P10 or P90. So it's like only 10 every 100 times you can have such low temperature in your historical record. This is what comes regarding probabilities, but the next most important question is, okay, but should I trust this probability? Should I make a decision based on this or not? And this is what on climate science is calculated and scored through skill levels. And this was really important from the scientific point of view, but it was also very important for the target audience for this tool. So we gave it a very relevant space, and we gave the possibility. And it was not only given the number, but it was empowering again the user of the tool to either see all the forecast everywhere or really filter it according to this quality. So if you filter like this, you're seeing the forecast as that is better than just looking into the past, but you could be more restrictive. You would like to find which places do you have a much higher level of confidence on your model. So here you see that the user could be able to remove part of the information to really focus on those areas where the forecast is not only giving a signal that is relevant for them, the probability, but is giving them a lot of information. And even more importantly, is about some of them, they want the numbers, some of them, they just want you to give a qualitative information. So we were playing with showing or not the information, showing the actual number, but also just giving them an idea of how much this level is. Is this a very good level, or is this just not very good? These two things, reaching this point, it seems simple here. This is almost 1 year and something of work. But because this goes to highly technical and highly interested to get a lot of information people, there was more. We were always requested to give more. And one of the things we wanted to do was to put climate information all together. So we were not only putting the forecast for the coming week, so we were providing them the forecast for each, I'm going to put the scale a bit lower, for each of the coming 4 weeks, but then we were also putting the forecast for the coming months. This, on the climate science part, on the scientific part of the project, it requires putting together two very different models. And but this should be transparent for the user. This is a problem, a technical problem on the side of creating this tool, but not a problem for the user. And one of the things that it was important for our users, and we had to find a way of how to solve it, was that they really wanted to see the evolution. They wanted to be able to see both these week subseasonal forecasts, they are called, and seasonal forecasts together, to see if there was a skill or not, and how the probabilities were evolving on time. And another layer of information we were requested for was that they really wanted to see the performance of the model over the last 30 years, to be able to see which was the observed value in that region selected and how the forecast was performing for that particular year. So as you see, it is a complex tool. There was a lot of information there, and we learned a lot. And one of the things we learned was that interacting with the information is key, because when you give the power to the person that is browsing, they find out creative and very different ways of interacting with the data that you didn't even foresee at the beginning. And one of the surprises for the project was that even for the scientists in the project, that they had already available this information and this forecast, they found out that interacting with the tool and with interacting visually with the forecast helped them to find some patterns that they were not really seeing that easy in the static maps they were creating through scripts. And of course, this is not the ultimate tool. I mean, we still know that there are many things that are not there, and by interacting, talking, getting the feedback with energy traders and other energy users, we find out that it's still very difficult to use this information in the decision-making processes. But only by having this type of tools, then you have a place to learn and to know how to improve and how to move forward until you get a service that really puts climate information into action for them. The second example is a totally different one. I had a lot of fun doing it, and we had, our purpose was really to get a wow factor. We really wanted to do something that was filling a gap of information, that we wanted to have it beautiful, aesthetic, and to impact people's memory. And the service we created is the seasonal hurricane predictions, and it provides the forecast or the average forecast number of hurricanes for the Atlantic region, but we are not providing that forecast. So the gap we were filling was that there are plenty of centers that are providing the expected number of hurricanes for the season. So the season is expected to start the 1st of June, and there are many centers that tell you they expect between 5, 4, or 8, 7. They expect an average of 6. They provide this information, but interested people, both technical and just plain people that is affected by the hurricane season, they had to go one by one.
Started at a different time.
If you can mute, George, if you can mute, please. So they had to go one by one to see the centers. What we did was to put this information together, to request these forecasters, pitch to them the idea, and tell them if they were happy for us to have their forecast together. And they were happy because this was another way of getting the information, and they're really happy. So when you see that you have this idea, so you have the average prediction. So the average for the season is 8, with a minimum of 6 and a maximum of 10, according to the different forecasters. And later is not much more. I mean, you see all the forecasters, what they are saying, that you can download the CSV with this information, or download a PDF that could include also this forecast explanation for the season. And if you ask me if this wow factor works or not, or okay, so basically here, this is 6 days ago, CNN. It was talking about the seasonal predictions for hurricanes. They were using our data, and they wanted, we have these beautiful visuals, but they wanted to make their own visuals. And that's one of the things that we took into account when developing it. Providing this CSV was giving freedom to whoever want to use the information, give them the freedom to do it in their way. And for us, it's a great success. I mean, that different media and that different people can really get and use our service. So something we learned is, it's interesting, is that we were looking for aesthetics, we were having fun, but we learned something on colors and how colors matters. And if you let me go again to the tool, here you will see that you can choose between low activity, normal activity, and high activity. When we were designing this service, we decided to use the traffic light colors, so green for low activity, orange and red. When the data visualization expert checked what we were doing, immediately, it was instantly, he was telling us that we were not using a colorblind friendly color scale. And 10% of men who were accessing to this website could have problems to see well this service. We had internal discussions, we were deciding what to do, and at the end we decided that well, the traffic light is kind of a standard, people is used to it, so we thought it was better to go to something that was common in the imaginary of people. The reality is that we launched it, and almost the same day, one of the directors of ESC came to congratulate us for this, and he told us that, well, that he's colorblind and he couldn't see, but he imagined that it was really nice. We changed it, and we learned that we should never avoid or forget about accessibility. I mean, we can make mistakes, we can always make mistakes, but it has to be a mistake. If we define and we find that there is a problem, we should never ignore it. And especially accessing online, is really important that we take care about maximizing the accessibility to the information. And also, and more positive thing we learn is a service sometimes can be as simple as just gathering relevant information. This service is not less important than the previous I have shown to you. They are completely different. The other one is very complex. This is very simple, but this is useful too. And the final one is, it is work in progress, so I cannot really show you a final product, but we are also learning a lot, even being at the beginning, at the half of the project. And what we are doing with this one is trying to simplify people's life. a particular type of audience. So we are targeting journalists and journalists who want to make stories about climate change. To say journalists, we could also be targeting climate influencers or people communicating climate change in general or climate. And our idea, based on some previous interviews, was that we wanted to provide visual information about climate scientific data in an impactful, beautiful way that they could really use to enrich their stories, or that they could really use to know how to build a story and then to put it together with the article. This is a work that is being performed for the Copernicus Climate Change Service, and it was highly related to one of the European climate services, great ones, that is the Climate Data Store, that provides climate information for free for everyone. But the point is the Climate Data Store is highly technical. There are some barriers on people really needed to understand better the climate science. Sometimes you need a bit of a scripting if you want to take the most of it. So we wanted to facilitate the access to this information in this Climate Data Store to journalists and to simplify to people who they are not climate experts and they don't want to become one. They just want to make a story fast. But for that, what we did was user experience research, and which is a bit what we do every time in climate services. Is this co-production? Is this finding who are the target audiences, trying to talk with them, making surveys, interviews, workshops if possible. And we were doing this research about what journalists really wanted, how they wanted the graphics, if they wanted to edit the graphics, if they wanted to download a vectorial image, what they wanted. And oh, surprise, what we found out is that we got wrong what journalists wanted. Journalists wanted data. We were thinking that they wanted to bypass the data, the Climate Data Store, to get directly the visuals. And they were actually asking always for the data. Of course, not the same data that is in the Climate Data Store. They wanted clean, easy data that you can just put into an Excel and plot, or maybe a bit more advanced. They wanted a specific version of data tailored for them, but they didn't want the visuals. And when we asked them, okay, if it's not data, what would you like to get? And they say that they would like to get contact with climate scientists to ask questions. So nowhere in our interviews and our surveys, we got the feeling that they were in a particular need for visuals, which was kind of striking for us. And you need to react to that. I mean, you cannot just ignore, say, no, I was going to make a nice and visual tool. We really had to change our structure. As I told you, I don't have a tool online because this is on development, but what I do have is this link, is a link for a test, is because we have been working on the first prototype, no design, visuals are really fake or not real ones. It's more about testing the functionalities. So we were asked about people wanted to get data. Okay, so how do you want to get data? If we put it here or there, do you find it? So if you want to play a bit around with the concept that we are developing, you can enter later after this webinar or tomorrow, whenever you want. It's 15 minutes and you have like 4 tasks, and then you are asked some questions so you can give as much feedback as you want. If you are a journalist or if you are a communicator specialized in climate change, you can contact me, of course. I will be very willing to put you in this co-production process because, yeah, I mean, the more people, the more feedback we get, the better we will be able to do it. But one of the things that I can, just to finish this part, and highlight from what we have been learning is, okay, it was not about visuals, but it was about how to find information. That was really important, that we really knew from the interviews. So we were thinking on how the topics they were looking for should be organized. So in an online platform, they could find it easily. And what happened if they didn't have any idea of what they were looking for, how they could find something that inspires them? And what happens with those that really know very specifically that they are looking for some information in the Arctic, something about shipping routes or whatever, how they could find it? And then we have been exploring how to structure information so they can really find the information, get some visuals, and this is a bit of a concession for we wanted to do something visual, but also the most important for all of them, how to download the data and those graphics. And what we have learned from the process, what we are learning, I know I'm going to learn much more on it, is that you always have to try to control your preconceived ideas. No matter what you think you wanted to do, what it matters is your audience and what they really need from this climate information or this service you're creating. And also something that sometimes we forget, we talk about visualization, but it is not only about the colors, it's not only about design, it's also about how we structure information visually. So where we put all the pieces of the relevant information in a graphic, in a figure, even in a magazine, it is relevant. And when you are trying to do a service that is useful, when you want to make information actionable, the user research, the functionalities have priority over design. And so this is it. And this is a bit the experience. And I could be talking hours for many of them because they are complex projects. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isadora, for your interesting presentation. Maybe a few questions explaining something, although I didn't see that much. There was one question why registration is required for the first example that you showed.
Yeah, this is something that happens quite often with these demonstrations or these projects. It is open for everyone, but you cannot learn about it if you don't know who is using it. So we needed to know if you create a service and no one is using it, then something is wrong. And having a registration was giving us this capacity to know who was interested with, who was registering and later disappearing. And so it was a way of understanding better the profile of people using it. Maybe you discover that this was targeted for energy, but people in agriculture could directly benefit from having forecasts from temperature. So yeah, it was a way of understanding who was using the tool.
Okay, thank you. There are a few more questions, but I would like to leave that for the rest of the discussion. Before starting the discussion, well, for everyone, if you have any questions or remarks, please put them in the chat function. I and Rob Groenland will screen them and will pose the questions. And we would like to go into discussion, especially about the experiences and lessons that, well, you, the participants, also learned. If you have reactions to the presented examples, and if you have other do's or don'ts related to visualization. So please ask your questions or put your remarks in the chat, and then Rob and I will look at it. Well, maybe Isadora and Bernadet can open their cameras again. Easier to have a discussion. I would like to start with the first question that was posed for Bernadet about the interaction with stakeholders for design. Maybe, well, first Bernadet can react to it, and maybe Isadora, you later on again. Yeah. Person asked whether interaction with users with stakeholders was important.
Well, before we published the scenarios which I presented, which were published in 2014, we had a lot of workshops with different kind of stakeholders. So during those workshops, people could give feedback, but we also had a user feedback group with all the different groups represented in. Like policy makers, water boards, people of engineering companies. And we presented the examples we made, for example, the brochure or the website, and also the colors of the scenarios. We already presented to this stakeholder group, and so they could give feedback. And this is what we are doing now again Now we're making new scenarios, which will be published in 2001 and 23. Oh no, I'm not presenting slides now. Was that the answer to the question?
Yes, thank you. I muted my phone. I was starting to speak again. Sorry. Thank you. I think so. Isadora, do you want to react to this? You showed a lot of examples where you also had interaction with users.
Yeah, for us, this is the core of what we do. I mean, we don't understand climate services only from climate science. And indeed, at BSc right now, I lead the team of knowledge transfer. We are 10 people now. I mean, 10 people that is not climate scientists that have or social sciences background, communication, economists. And the objective of this and the reason that we can be 10 of us, and there are also a lot of climate scientists too, but is because when talking with people is key to make these type of tools. Is otherwise you get something that is not useful. And what we do is we try to get the most. Either we make case studies, we try to publish them to give them visibility in social networks. We go to conferences, not scientific ones, but the ones for a particular sector. So if we are doing a climate services for the wine sector, then we try to be where the people from the wine sector is. We try to talk with the cluster for wine in a particular region so they understand what we are doing. So yeah, it's co-production of knowledge is a key word in climate services.
Thank you. There was another question, but I think you more or less answered it. Someone is asking, what channels of communication are you using to engage with users? Well, you said already you're going to the users, and Bernadet already said that she is organizing workshops with users, panels, etc. Something to add to this?
I could add a different thing is that once you get to a particular person in one sector that knows you, learn what you are doing, one of the best channels is using that person because they become ambassadors. They really know what you are doing, and they are the ones who can really promote what you are doing into their networks. So it's not about, you cannot reach all the networks, but those people, they are really have this catalyzing capacity of reaching much more people. And I think this is also a very important channel for climate services.
Yeah. And maybe something to add, well, from my personal experience, is that it's also good to have contact with various persons from the same sector, for example, because they may have different views on what you present. Yes.
And I would like to add as well that we also have good contact with the weather presenters. And I already gave the example that we are giving information at our website, but of course these persons are much better ambassadors themselves, and they also have their own big network in which they really communicate a lot about climate change.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Bernadet. Yeah, there was another question about, well, you told already something about it, but special approaches for different types of users, stakeholders, for decision makers, politicians, or other people. Do you both want to comment on that? Well, you told already something about it, but do you want to add something more on different approaches for different groups? Bernadet, maybe?
Well, yeah, we don't diverge that much, or we have the big brochure with a lot of information for the professional user, which is a very broad group. And then we have this information which is more general and more easy reading, more for the general public. And of course, we would like to diverge much more. But well, we don't have that possibility actually to make that specific for different groups.
Okay, and Isadora?
Yeah, in our case, over the last years, we haven't quite focused on particular sectors like renewable energies or agriculture, the wine sector specifically. And but depending on who are you targeting, then you make things different. So, for example, for agriculture related, then it's really important to talk in their own language. So it's really important if you go to oil people, then in Spain, you really need to talk with them in Spanish. If you go to wine producers in Portugal, you really need to be talking Portuguese. So in this cases, workshops, for example, are better tools because they are more face-to-face and you do it in the right language. If you go to policymakers, then policy briefs, policy summaries, there's a whole structure on how policymakers in general want to get information. So you really need to know which are the rules of that type of communication material, which is different than outreach material. I'm not that lucky to make this outreach, really broad outreach material, but yeah, it also makes a difference on what you do and who do you share it with. There are many types of ways of sharing information, but I guess there's from the general awareness raising, so it's like websites, user interface platforms, forums, then you can go to more targeted, so you get to doing surveys, interviews, which is you get to a level where you talk more face-to-face, so you start to get names, you start to know, you're not talking to someone that maybe is listening or not, but you know who are you talking with, and a lot of these face-to-face in meetings. And then when you go to like the decision support tool to create a concept, and then you work hand by hand doing something, that's also a change of communication, not only because you make this tool, but because you learn a lot about their business and about how they see climate while you are doing this process. So there are multiple channels.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Rob, could you pick out a few more questions from the chat?
Yes, I've one question from Irene Lake about uncertainties. And yeah, for a lot of stakeholders, a lot of users, they would like to have just one message or just one number. And she's referring to the IPCC reports. And in those reports, they differentiate between statements with a high certainty and a low certainty. And so basically her question is about if it is effective to differentiate between results with a high reliability or a low reliability.
I can answer this. It's very difficult to get a balance because no matter what you do, you're gonna have people asking you the opposite. So when we try to give a lot of numbers, then we always get feedbacks and requests that say, no, but can you make it just qualitative so I know if I have to trust or not this number? But then if you go the other way and you only give this, trust about this, then you get someone telling, but which score, what skill score are you using? Is this trustable or not? And how are you calculating? So it is very difficult. It's very difficult, and uncertainty has not been, how to communicate uncertainty has not been solved yet. I mean, there's a lot of studies of it, there's a lot of research, but I don't have a solution.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I see in the chat that Irene ends her question with, I was wondering really what you think, what will work with regards to how to show uncertainties. Yeah.
Well, the scenarios we give is a way as well to show uncertainties. And the 4 scenarios, climate scenarios, which we give, they have the same plausibility. And that's something people find also very difficult because they keep on asking, but which scenario is more plausible than the other one? So that's also a reason why we try to give an even number so that people will use the middle one, because people will get the impression that it's more plausible, but it's not the case.
Isadora, I see you nodding. Do you want to react to this?
No, sorry, I was reading one of the questions. Sorry.
Okay.
No, I mean, for me, I told you, I mean, we did the DST, I was involved in it, so I already took decisions about how to show uncertainty. And in general, I think something that works for any visualization online is the progressive disclosure of information. So going from the more simple indicators of trust or not trust, but then always give the users the possibility to go deeper into the information, so they can really, if they really feel that this is too broad, they have a way to see more information. I think this is the general advice I could give.
Okay, thank you. Rob, another question?
Yeah, I've got another question from Gratian Kwarat. Her question is about how do you collect the information about what the audience needs, which comes out C3S data store. Is it small focus groups or a survey?
So for this specific service that I was showing for journalists, we were doing interviews, we were doing surveys, and we had an advisory board of high-level journalists, people who can really not only give us a perspective for a big part of the sector, but also then multiply when we really need them to reach their networks. But in general, for the climate data store, then there is also a contract for Copernicus, where there are these specific focus groups to understand how the information in the climate data store is fulfilling the needs of the people who want to access. And it is done usually with focus group of some people that have shown their interest to provide this feedback with a bit more of a commitment of participating in some meetings every some time, but then also being in EU, being in conferences where you have the profile of type of people who are interested with this, and being sure that if they are interested, they find the right interlocutor. So they see a face with which to start explaining this feedback. If it's just punctual feedback, of course, Copernicus has a very clear sign on it. There's a place to put all your feedback, and to all this information is being analyzed and is being integrated to improve the service. So yeah.
Okay. There's another question. Someone asked whether the message to some different groups should be sometimes different. So, for example, to politicians. Do you have an idea or reaction to that, Bernadet and Isadora? Isadora?
Yeah, I cannot. I just was given the opportunity to Bernadet, but yeah, for sure. I was telling. I mean, each type of audience is different. This is one of the basics of communication. And I'm not climate scientist. I'm science communication expert, and this is what I know about. And no matter who you talk, you have to understand who are you talking, and then you have to adapt the message. Sometimes we don't have the time, we don't have the resources to do it, but ideally, you never think you are just talking to society. Who is society? You're talking to young people, you're talking to your grandparents. If you're talking with people in business, it's not the same talking to the CEO of a company that talking with a technician that has to make a decision about about the maintenance operation. So you always have to think, who are you talking with and how do you explain? And it changes the words, it changes the information they want to find, and it changes the channel. So yeah, it's the core of
But does that also mean that the message is different, or should the basic message be the same but presented in a different way?
It depends. I'm quite biased to climate services, and because different profiles need different types of information, the message can be completely different. If we are talking about the message about climate change, then the general overarching message is the same. But again, how you focus on economy or how you focus in the impacts on people, it's a new message. So you have an overarching message, but then you have specific ones for your audiences.
Okay. Bernadet, do you want to react to that?
No, yeah, I agree. I was thinking, well, of course, the facts are the same, but because the target group is different, your goal is as well different, so the message can be different as well.
Yeah, and you maybe pick out different things for certain groups and other things for other groups.
Yeah.
Okay. Then there was a question before about well, the first example of Isadora. Yeah, well, you explained something about the users. It's a rather complicated tool, I think. Is it? Well, the person asks whether this is only for educated users or also for people who have less background knowledge.
Ideally, if you stick to the basic, it could be used for by someone who is not an energy trader. But of course, once you go deeper into selecting a point, and if you make the advanced panel, then it starts to be kind of scary. It was even scary for our technical users the first time they saw it. But the concept of seeing the color in the map, it is simple. So no, it's not impossible to be used by normal people, like a forecast. I mean, we have seen a few heat waves there, and it's really cool. I mean, I have been sharing with friends, like, look at, you're on holidays in France, and this, I think it was last summer, and you're gonna have a massive heat wave there, and look at it. And so yeah, sometimes you can just share it.
Yeah. Okay. There was also a remark at the presentation of Bernadet on one of the slides, one on Greenland's slide, and you asked whether it was misleading or not, and someone reacted to that it was, well, that this person found it indeed misleading. Do you have other examples of what could be misleading, or where there is an impression that people get?
The person thinking it's misleading, why then, or why is it misleading in this case?
Yeah, that isn't mentioned yet. Maybe we get a reaction.
I want to add one thing. It's what I was not in. I think there was a question, say, couldn't this information about, I think it's about the journalist application, if it couldn't be used by people talking against climate change? And I have to say that this was exactly one of the things that concerned us and some of the internal discussions we were having. You provide information, they can do whatever. And then you also have to be aware of the risk that then someone can use the tool in a very different direction of the one that you want. So it was a discussion. We didn't get to the final decision because this is on visualization as a general concept. There is something called like moderated, I don't get the words, like moderated content. So you can allow people to make graphics, but you can put limits to which type of graphics they can do if you think that they can be misleading. But then you have to be very clear on which are the rules you put or not. And it can be really annoying for someone to find out that some things they want to do, you cannot, and others, yes. But yeah.
Okay.
It was a concern we had.
Yeah. But but it's not exactly the same, but it was one of the things that Bernadet also mentioned, that it's important to check whether the information that you provide, and that can be visuals, or the data can be interpreted in a different way, not the way that you think is the correct one.
Yeah, I think I also see that people added the reason why it is misleading, the use of the picture, because, well, it's a sled on water, so you're assuming that's not normal, or people will assume that's not normal. And it's about IPCC, so people already connected to climate change. Even if we say the picture is climate change.
Yeah. But the person also says that so the implicit message is to suggest unusual, between brackets, melting.
Yeah.
It was an unusual situation, but melting itself It's not unusual.
Yeah, so no, the picture was not an unusual situation.
Okay. Yeah. There's also someone who said, the same person said, I teach climate change at the university, and this is a recurring problem for me, to find effective images that are accurate at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know if he or she already knows the Climate Visuals website, but that's, I think, a really good source in which you can also select on photographs showing impacts and solutions and persons. So you can easily pick out of all these different subjects. So you don't only show impacts or only solutions. That was of great help to me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the person said I will definitely consult the website of Climate Visuals.
Yes.
There was another question for Isadora, whether the information on the project with journalists is published already. Is that the case?
No. This is a work in progress. This is part of a contract with Copernicus, and we are executing it now. And also, when you make these interactions with users, you have to think it's like waves. So you make a first interaction, you learn a lot, you test what you get, but then again, you need to do more research with the things that you have learned. So I think there's still room to learn more and to enrich these results. So for example, one thing that may happen is that we are targeting, or we have get in contact to more data-driven journalists than we expected, even if they don't define themselves as data-driven. So for example, we really need to be sure that all the types of journalists or communicators on climate change, maybe they have different requirements that this type of journalists. So yeah, that's why all this information is still not public.
Yeah. Okay, but you will publish it later on or something on it?
I think I don't know. I don't know, because it's a contract with Copernicus. So this is from the commission. Most of it, if the information is relevant, usually it's up to them to say if we can release these reports or not. I guess again, the type of reports we do, they are thinking on how to inform the decisions we make on functionalities of the tool. So the way they are not useful. So we should really either put it in the form of a research paper, or we should really put it in a format that is really more useful for the rest. Right now, these reports are specified for how to develop a tool. So sometimes, I mean, we try to share as much as possible everything we do, because I think the more we learn about the good practices, the better for everyone in the field.
Yeah. Okay. I think that also refers to well, one of my own experiences, that many people learn a lot about visualization just by doing, but well, it's much easier if we could exchange more information about, well, for example, this communication, but also visualization, and discuss more about the do's and don'ts, because that will help others to, well, to prevent making mistakes, or maybe not just mistakes, but to have more effective communication.
And I think there's one thing missing, that sometimes climate change communication for many years has been driven by climate scientists. And it was depending a bit on those climate scientists, if they were natural communicators or not, or if they thought it better or not. I think we have a lot of experts. It's what I was saying, marketing people, they have been decades doing good communication to get their objectives. So my recommendation is to get the experts who know about visualization into the team, is to get people who know about narratives into the team. So depending on what you have to do, it's not about, I mean, it's good to have do's and don'ts and we all benefit from it, but it's trying to move out from just, I do it myself and I think it's nice. It's like, there has been 30 years of research on social sciences, learn from it. And if there is this human-computer interaction, user experience on how to make information on mobiles and devices and online, then we really need to learn from these disciplines, not just start reinventing the wheel.
Yeah. But then the question is, what is the best way to include all those other expertises in communication? That is sometimes difficult, I think. I think that, well, Bernadet, you had experience with a student, Els Aerts, about the storytelling.
Yes, yeah.
That was, I think, of great help to get also access to different experiences.
Yes, because she had more knowledge of this cultural theory and the values, specific social values people have. Yeah, she was looking at total different literature than we are used to look at KNMI. So I think that was really useful to have a student of science communication at our institute. So yeah, I think that might be a start to good start to start with students doing internships at your institute.
Yes, Isadora.
I started in the field of climate services 5 years ago. And it was because the director of the department really believed that it was good to have different profiles working together with the scientists. And at BSc, at the beginning, it was collapse. It's like, what did someone in communication or science communication expert not working with the communication people, but being with the scientists? And this was 5 years ago. It was only one person, me, and now we are 10. So I think it is difficult because it's changing dynamics on how it is done. But as you start doing it, you can do things different. So you can do outstanding things. You can really do things differently. And because this shows your success, then you have more probabilities of being able to sustain the model and be getting more people. So this 10 people is not 10 people in communication. It's people with very different profiles. And we are not the only ones doing it, this mixing different profiles. I mean, one of the things that is the main problem is about how to sustain economically this, because at the very beginning, if scientists are forced only to publish, then it's very difficult that they can devote you the time to sit with people in communication, to give you the advice, how to revise the text as many times as necessary. But I think if there is initiative from a particular group, department on doing this way, and a bit of support on the economic side, at the end, you can really foster this type of working of having people together.
Okay, thank you. We almost reached 3:30, so I think we have to close the webinar. But I think that what you both say, that it would be very good to have more interaction between different disciplines. So also include people from communication, but also from impact research, etc. I think that would be of social sciences, etc. So that would be really good to do. I hope we can in some way continue this discussion in another way, maybe with another webinar or something. But I would like to thank Isadora and Bernadet for their contributions, and also all the participants. We realized that several of the questions are not answered, but we will download the chat and see which questions are still remaining and try to answer these questions together with the speakers. So thank you for that. Then a few more things. Well, I said I hope there will be a follow-up. There is one thing that I would like to bring under your attention. As some of you may already know, the Climate Europe Festival that would be organized in June is cancelled, but there will be a virtual version of the Climate Europe Festival, and that will consist of well, days distributed over several months of this year, where virtual meetings will be organized. And one of them, it's not clear yet which one, will also contain a workshop led by Isadora. So everyone interested, keep an eye on the Climate Europe website, and those interested can probably subscribe to this workshop also. Thank you all. And I will now stop recording, but you will all get information about where the presentations and the recording will be published. Thank you.
Thank you for your attention.
Goodbye.
Thank you for your attention. Thank you.